Good evening, I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
From ABC News, around the world and into your home, the stories that touch your life. With Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters. This is 2020.
It's a Pearl Harbor anniversary story you probably won't see anywhere else. The intriguing possibility that in launching a sneak attack, Japan did to us what we might well have done to them. Tonight you'll hear the details of a secret plan approved at the highest levels of the U.S. government.
With the approach of the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, America has been getting a refresher course on the attack. We're reminded that in the fall of 1941, relations between the U.S. and Japan had steadily deteriorated. But untold is that the United States itself was plotting a secret effort against the Japanese. And now, as Stone Phillips shows us, the old story has a new chapter.
It was Sunday afternoon in New York, and many Americans were cozied up to the radio, listening to an exciting football game.
He's up to the 25, and now he's hit and hit hard about the 27-yard line. Bruiser Kennard made the tackle. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
It was news that stunned the nation.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Now, when most Americans think of Pearl Harbor, they remember how badly the U.S. was blindsided by Japan's naked and unprovoked aggression. How we were literally caught dead in the water, virtual sitting ducks. But what most Americans don't know, and what President Roosevelt never disclosed, is that America had its own secret plan to bomb Japan first. This plan, signed and approved by FDR himself on July 23, 1941, nearly 5 months before Pearl Harbor.
I certainly didn't know that there were plans for strategic bombing of Japan before Pearl Harbor.
Are historians generally familiar or aware
I don't
of
think
this?
so. I've read, I've looked in some of the standard histories of this period, and I have not found any reference to this at all. So I think this is new.
This eye-opening document was actually declassified around 1970, but incredibly, it remained buried here at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. for decades. The plans are laid out in black and white, the planes that were to be used, their targets, and it proves that the official story of America's entry into World War II was by no means the whole story, and that from someone who was there. No one knew about the bombing plans.
That was secret. All the supplies were secret. I mean, what we were sending was not a matter of public knowledge.
Our story begins with a romantic chapter out of military lore, well known to the American public. It is the story of the Flying Tigers and their famous shark-toothed P-40s. Also known as the American Volunteer Group, or AVG, they were a small group of daring U.S. flyers, led by this fighter ace named Claire Chennault. They were known as mercenaries, hired by China before Pearl Harbor to help fight off the brutal Japanese invaders.
Look, Captain Jim, looky, wham, wham!
Termites.
Flying Tiger Charlie Mott.
The Japanese were the bad guys, no question about it.
And your mission was to take them on?
Yes, yes.
Their primary objective was to protect China's only lifeline, this winding supply route known as the Burma Road.
Certainly, order of priority was one, seize control of the air over China. Keep China in the war.
Skip Adair's job was to find the volunteer pilots. When you were recruiting men for the American Volunteer Group that summer, 1941, what was the strategic goal of the operation?
Well, to kill as many damn Japanese as we could. That's simple.
But in reality, the pilots Adair recruited were not mercenaries at all. While they flew under the Chinese flag, their operation was planned and paid for by the U.S. government. The U.S. government knew about this, helped develop this plan.
Not only knew about it, but they were 100% behind it. Where do you think the $50 million came from? The United States. It was secret. nobody was supposed to talk about it. We did a damn good job of keeping it secret.
And the need for secrecy wasn't just for military reasons. Sending not just equipment, but soldiers to China would have been a violation of U.S. neutrality laws. Flying Tiger Ed Rector.
It was against the U.S. law to fight for under another flag for another country.
But what most Americans will be startled to hear, and what is the subject of this report, is that the United States, long before Pearl Harbor, had secret plans for a second American volunteer group with a much more daring mission. Flying Tiger Dick Rossi.
There was a second group, which would be a bomber group, and the third group would be another fighter group.
So it was all in the works.
Yes,
at least that was what you were being told.
Yes.
We knew that there's going to be a bomber group formed. In fact, Chenault told me that I would probably get the bomber group.
A secret bomber group flying against Japan before Pearl Harbor? Sounds inconceivable. But Claire Chenault, the leader of the Flying Tigers, laid out his offensive strategy for Japan early on. Quote, if the men and equipment were of good quality, such a force could cripple the Japanese war effort. A small number of long-range bombers carrying incendiary bombs could quickly reduce Japan's paper and matchwood cities to heaps of smoking ashes. Now, those were Chenault's words. The question is whether his plan was backed up by the White House. That's the crucial question we wanted someone to answer.
But after half a century, we thought that might be impossible. Well, surprisingly, there is one key figure from FDR's White House who is still around to answer our questions.
His name is Lachlan Curry. In 1941, he was one of the president's closest advisors, Roosevelt's personal envoy to China, and Claire Chenault's biggest supporter in the White House. Today, Curry lives in South America. He is 89 years old, and his voice is frail. But he did agree to help us understand those dramatic days preceding Pearl Harbor.
Claire Chenault wanted to bomb Japan, didn't he?
Yes, very much so.
You were an enthusiastic supporter of Chenault's plan.
Oh, yes. And I helped in every way I could, yes.
To push the plan through, to see that it was executed.
The whole project, yes.
This was the secret plan, as presented to President Roosevelt, called JB 355, JB standing for Joint Board, which is the equivalent of today's Joint Chiefs of Staff. Discreetly labeled aircraft requirements of the Chinese government, it lists among the strategical objectives destruction of Japanese factories in order to cripple production of munitions and essential articles for maintenance of economic structure in Japan. The distances from Chinese air bases to target cities in Japan are clearly mapped out. Nagasaki, 730 miles from Chuchao. Osaka, 1,060 miles from Manchao. Tokyo, 1,780 miles from Hangzhou. Was it workable? Were planes available that could do the job? An entry written by renowned General Hap Arnold says, the Lockheed Hudsons have ample range to perform missions against targets in Japan. Advanced bases are available in eastern China. It is 1,300 miles from these advanced bases to industrial Japan. The plan was signed off by the Secretary of War, the Secretary of the Navy, and approved by FDR. The date, July 23, 1941, almost 5 months before Pearl Harbor. When we showed Joint Board Plan 355 to Lachlan Curry after 50 years, he said some parts seemed familiar while other parts did